Hi everybody, I'm Mark Fox, Chairman of the Business Innovation Leaders Forum. Delighted to welcome you here today for our session on innovative networking strategies to accelerate your competitive edge. Chairing today's session, we have Erin Dunne, Director of Research Services at Vertical Systems Group, plus CIOs and CTOs of some of the leading companies in the industry, such as Alkira, Box, Eaton, Tata Communications, and Zebra. Erin, over to you to introduce today's session.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for the team at Net Events for setting up this sure to be really interesting event. As you can see here, we have a very distinguished panel and a diverse panel here, lots of different viewpoints. I think we're gonna get a lot of varied viewpoints as we move forward into the discussion. As Mark said, I'm Erin Dunne. I direct the research practice at Vertical Systems Group. We're a market research and consulting firm based in Boston, Mass, in the USA. We have Atif Khan. He's the CTO and founder of Alkira. Ravi Malik, global CIO from Box. Katrina Redmond, she's the SVP and CIO from Eaton. And Amit from Tata Communications, heading up global Marcom. Tom Bianculli, CTO from Zebra. A great panel we have going forward today. I'm going to spend just a few minutes walking through a very high-level overview of what we're going to talk about today. And then we're going to have 3 different discussion topics that we'll walk through with all of the speakers. Before that, each speaker will have a couple of moments to introduce themselves, their organization, and why they're taking time out of their very busy lives to spend time with us here today on this panel. So moving forward from there, the 3 topics that we'll spend some time discussing with today: innovation for business transformation. Then we're going to focus a little bit more on the network technologies and strategies to enhance the competitive edge. And then looking forward, we'll spend a little time on how things are changing and maybe, what do we need out of the industry to keep the momentum moving with innovation and transformation. So from there, first slide here that I'm not going to spend hardly any time on. What this is just an overview of the topics that we are going to be discussing in the first segment on business transformation and innovation. You don't need me to spend a lot of time on this, because this is where we really need to hear from our speakers and their diverse viewpoints. We'll talk about the benefits. We're talking about the consequences of waiting. What if we do nothing? The winners, will hear some industry examples of what our panelists have seen throughout the industry on what's really working and maybe what's not working. And then, of course, we have to touch on, especially over the last year and a half or so, the people and processes. Transformation really depends on resources, and a lot of that is the people. So we'll spend some time on that. And then moving forward from here, we'll spend some time on networking strategies, and this is incredibly important. Here's what my firm calls the 5 C's of networking migration. And really, I think networking migration in this case is limiting, because these drivers are really relate to all technical decisions. We have control. Application traffic now, as we know, it's much more dynamic, it's much more real time. And we need network management capabilities for the design, the optimization, the analytics, the SLAs, the orchestration, to be able to control that. So we have a couple of panelists here that would dive a little deeper into that. The connectivity, as we all know, it's just not the application traffic that's changed. It's the networks that this traffic rides on. And without the network, everything kind of goes away. We hope no one's Wi-Fi drops during the call. It happens. And so the interesting thing here is there's so many changes that are happening with the connectivity. Bandwidth is up. Legacy services are down. Emerging services are up. Point-to-network type of services are up. Point-to-point services are down. Broadband, as we know, has really become a much more important part of our everyday lives recently. And to the press here that's listening in, I'm happy to feed you some statistics on that if you need anything, but I'm not doing it here and taking the time. As far as the cost goes, as we know, dedicated versus broadband services, high versus low speed services, the whole goal here is better cost per bit. And that is really taking a dive. So we're seeing a lot of cost improvements in the value to cost ratio. We'll also hear from some of our panelists here about the OpEx and the CapEx efficiencies. There's probably a question on that buried in here. Cloud. If I could choose one here that is the most important, it would be cloud. First of all, because the public and the private cloud is what drives, and the use of that is what drives all of the differences in our in the ecosystem that we're seeing now. And each one of our panelists here touches the cloud in a very different way. And it's very, very important for their overall business plans, their overall business processes. So we'll hear a lot more about that. Last one, cybersecurity. You know, I don't look at this as a driver as much as it is a requirement and a surprise. When you start taking, you know, layer 2, layer 3 dedicated services that have the underlay and the overlay connected, and then you separate that, all of a sudden security becomes a big issue that needs to be managed. When you take thousands of employees from tall, shiny buildings and you put them in their homes, security needs to be an issue. And so we'll talk a little bit about that going forward, but I promise we will not go into the security deep dive that you can get from many other panels. Okay, moving on from here, the very last slide here that, again, I am not going to spend a lot of time on because you all do not need to see another analyst slide talking about the drivers, issues, and outcomes. What I'd like to drive home here is that here are the results of a lot of the research that my firm has done over the last many years, talking to vendors, talking to service providers, talking to enterprise users who are making decisions on how to spend their time, their resources, and their dollars. And here's a very high-level roll-up of what they're telling us their primary challenges, their primary initiatives are. And the takeaway here is look at the difference between 19, when things were rolling along, and 2020, when the bottom dropped out and we had to make a lot of what I'd call defensive decisions. And then 2021, as we were able to refocus. What we're going to hear from our panelists as we get into the third section is what's next. First of all, do they agree with these? And second of all, what are they seeing going forward over the next year to 12 to 18 months? So I think that's going to be a very, very interesting discussion. Okay, so moving on from here, I am going to take a few moments and hand it over to our, as I said, very distinguished and very diverse panel. It's time to meet them. Each one of our panelists will have just a minute or so to tell us who they are, what they do, what their organization does, and I think that's very important because maybe some of our listeners here are not familiar with each one of these companies. And I think most importantly, why do they take time out of their day to spend here on this panel? What drives, what's their interest and what drives them to talk about this specific topic? So with that, I'm going to hand over to Atif and give him a few moments. Please take yourself off mute, Atif.
Thank you very much, Erin. Very nice to meet all of the panelists here, and thanks for having me as one of the people on the panel. I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Atif Khan. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Alkira, and I'm also one of the founders of Alkira. At Alkira, we are building a multi-cloud networking as a service platform. It allows enterprises to build and operate global cloud networks with integrated network and security services. We provide full end-to-end visibility, governance, policy, and management. It's all built and consumed as a service. So one of the key things to note here is that it's fully delivered as a service and consumed as a service. So prior to Alkira, I was also one of the founding team members of Viptela, which was one of the SD-WAN pioneers. and it was acquired by Cisco back in 2017. And now, as all of you know, SD-WAN is a multi-billion-dollar market, and Viptela still happens to be one of the leading players on the SD-WAN side. My interest here, why am I here? I think, as you touched on a few things, innovation is one of the essentials, or one of the essential attributes of survival. There's a lot of innovation which still needs to happen on the networking side. I think because of this cloud era, things are changing. Networking needs to change as rapidly as like some of the other technologies which have changed because of the advancements in the cloud. So, so I'm here to discuss what we are doing as a vendor on the networking side, what type of innovation we see which needs to happen for our customers to innovate on top of. And very excited to be here.
All right, well, thank you very much. How about Ravi?
Morning or afternoon or wherever you may be at
They're
this time.
everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you, Erin. So I'm Ravi Malik. I'm the global CIO at Box. Box is the leading cloud content management platform. What does that mean? You know, if you think about content and your business and how content really is the center of your business, when you think about innovation in particular, you know, it is that's what we do. You know, thinking about the future of work and content, it's digital, it's anywhere, it's secure. You know, what Box does is protect that, protect your content, empower your people, and connect your business. You know, my interest in this panel is really, you know, as Atif said, around innovation, but particularly when it comes to network. I think network kind of has been a little bit, you know, like the kid in the back of the class constantly raising his hand, I'm important, I'm important, I'm important, is now at the front of the class. And it's sort of like, okay, now you're here. What does that mean? All right. Why are you so important now? And I think you know, it's an opportunity now for people to really understand and realize the importance and how that needs to play into innovation. And if you have you know, if you're innovating, you have to have a network strategy. The plumbing is, you know, it's incredibly important. You know, whether it comes to performance and enablement. So, you know, and then the security of it as well. So this is definitely a topic I think is going to get more and more interest, you know, as we continue this kind of new way of working.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you. How about Katrina?
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for having me as well. I'm Katrina Redmond. I'm the CIO for Eaton Corporation. A little different than the rest of the folks on the panel. We're actually a heavy industrial. We do power management. We have an aerospace business, vehicle, electrical. We operate in most of the countries across the world. Heavy product, connected product position, and we're looking at driving, obviously, you know, improved experience from a sustainability, safety, reliability perspective. We're actually, as an old industrial, right, we're actually ripe, and in order to, you know, continue to perpetuate decades to come, we have to continue to innovate both the product that we create for our consumers and customers, as well as how we work internally. So we actually consume a lot of the different technologies that are mentioned here on the panel, and we are looking at, you know, different ways to do data monetization with the connected product that we have. How do we add that value to our customer base, as well as, you know, the challenges between on-prem versus cloud. When you've got heavy military and government presence throughout the world, how do you manage that? So there's a lot of different tentacles, I think, that connect the dots for our company with some of the discussion that we'll have this morning. But I think we're a sort of a connected community additionally, where we're all trying to figure out the same things and apply them potentially differently, but, you know, leverage and take advantage of them just the same. So I'm looking forward to this discussion this morning and hearing from the fellow panelists as well as any questions we may have. And from here, I'll turn it to Amit, I believe.
Please do.
Thanks for that, Katrina, and thank you, Erin and Mark, for having me here. It is indeed a pleasure to be a part of this esteemed panel. I am the Global Head of Marketing and Communications at Tata Communications. We are a part of the 150-plus-year-old Tata Group, from salt to steel, from IT to automotive. We have multiple industries in the group, and Tata Communications, we have our roots in India. We're a global ecosystem enabler, and we have been in the business for many years. But Tata has actually acquired a stake in this organization back in 2002. Why am I here? Clearly, the network is one of the areas that is key to our business. We created a solution, platform solution called Secure Connected Digital Experiences. I'll talk a little bit about that later in the session. But just to give you an idea of who we are and what we do, we partner with over 300 of the Fortune 500 organizations globally. If you look at our network, it carries more than 30% of the world's internet routes, right? And that's about 7,600 petabytes of traffic also travels through our internet backbone every month. And if you look at cloud, almost 50% of the cloud computing providers are connected to our businesses via our ISO Cloud Enablement Network. So there's a lot happening there. And I'll be happy to talk about some of these as we go through the session today. And with that, let me hand it back, and I believe it'll be Tom.
Yes, hi everybody, and thanks to Net Events and thanks to Erin for hosting. So, Tom Bianculli, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Zebra Technologies, and as we like to say, we're hidden in plain sight. If you're not familiar with Zebra, if you've gone through a point of sale checkout lane, you will have noticed our barcode scanning, reading equipment, or inventory being replenished on a shelf, or a vehicle being unloaded, or even a package being delivered to your doorstep that you have to sign for from a courier. Those will typically be using all of our devices, RFID, barcode reading, and printing technology, where we're fortunate enough to have #1 market share in each one of those categories and do business with about 90% of the Fortune 500. So, Amit, I can't say we're from salt to steel. That's a killer line. I'm taking that one away. But we are really in the business of providing visibility and mobility solutions that help track goods, people, assets, capital assets as they move through the supply chain. And our vision is something we call enterprise asset intelligence. And the notion of that vision, which is, I think, really germane to today's conversation, is when every asset and worker on the edge, I think we're all familiar with the edge now. It's been used as a vernacular more and more of, where work is getting done, right? Where the interactions are happening and commerce is being exchanged, is being able to provide that visibility to those workers, those assets on the edge, to have them be connected, visible, and ultimately optimally utilized. And so we're now leveraging our visibility and mobility solutions and layering software on top of that visibility and mobility that can perform analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, for the purposes of being able to orchestrate what we call the next best action. So if you're that worker delivering that package, or you're that retail worker in the front of the store that's engaging with a customer, or you're the clinician about to administer medication to a patient, it's ensuring that every action you take can be orchestrated for both the satisfaction of that worker, but also for just overall the best outcomes. And a real quick fun fact, if you want to check it out, Zebra uses some of our visibility technology to track football players at every NFL game across the nation to within 6 inches of accuracy 10 times a second, something called next-gen stats that you'll see highlighted by the broadcasters. In terms of why I'm here and so interested in working with Mark and Erin on the conversation, I think pace is something that we've been really mindful of, the pace of change, the pace of the change of not just technology, but really the expectations that our customers are putting on us as a Fortune 500 players, but also their end customers are putting on them And that's just a ripple effect that, requires us all to think not just more innovatively, which is almost a cliche, right? But differently in terms of how we innovate. And one of the ways we're thinking differently around that is around open innovation, partnering with the likes of my other panel members on here, with other companies, and saying competitive differentiation is going to come from speed and collaboration, and not from hunkering down on core competencies that you only maintain within your four walls. So thanks very much.
Thank you. That's great. Now, we spent a little more time on the introductions here than was originally scheduled. And the reason for that is because it's incredibly interesting to see where each one of the panelists come at when looking at innovation and transformation. As we flip forward onto the first topic, we had a bunch of questions here. But it seems to me that the emphasis for most of these folks is really on our second section, which is where we're talking about the networking technologies, the strategies, how it enhances your competitive edge. So what we're going to do is spend just a little bit of time on this first topic and to keep us on the schedule, and then we'll kick forward right into that second topic. So what I want to start off with here on what is asking Ravi, talking about the importance of innovation. I'd love to hear from you. Why is innovation important to your organization? Very quick, very succinct. And any of the other panelists that want to jump in on this, please do right after Ravi. And then I think we'll move right into some of the networking talk. All right?
Sure. So, I mean, innovation is certainly core to what we do as a company that provides a product out to the consumer base. It's probably one of the biggest, aspects of value that we can provide to our customers. That I think there's an expectation certainly that we're going to constantly innovate, particularly in our space, and continually invest in our core product offering. I think a recent example of that is how we're doing that and continuing to innovate around content is Box Sign, right? So Box Sign, e-signatures, digital signatures, obviously, the trend continuing to push hard into that space. And when we think about content, that is another step in managing and enabling content in a digital and automated way. I think there are other examples around, things that we've done in Box Notes within the platform, really focusing on how do we innovate and meet the needs as well as anticipate the needs of, this new way of working and how we're thinking about the future of work.
I think as a consumer of any of the products or services that are available, even from the speakers organizations here, how frustrating is it when you just feel like it's old or there's a competitor out there that's doing it faster, quicker. It's so thank you for those innovations there, because as a user, we love it. Anyone else want to jump right in there with a quick look at why this innovation is important? And we did hear from most of you about it in the intros, but anyone else want to jump?
Erin, if it's okay, I could talk about the cutting edge or weight. I think that's a critical point that you have up there. And interestingly, this was validated by a global CXO survey that we recently concluded with about 750 organizations across 11 countries. And based on the maturity of the digital platform deployment in these companies, we classified them into three distinct categories. Digital trailblazers, the ones on the top,
right?
Migrators, the one in the middle, and aspirants, the guys who are at the start. And some of the very interesting data points that I'd like to share with this group and with the audience is, at an aggregate level, surprisingly, 90% of the enterprises surveyed, 90, are yet to achieve digital first goals, and that's today.
That's not surprising to me at all.
Yeah, the biggest issue is cybersecurity, right? And you talked about that. And almost half attributed productivity loss during the crisis to connectivity, and that comes to network, right? As we talk about the next thing. Another half talked about the fear of employee burnout without the right tools and platforms and systems. And then almost 40% confirmed the threat of losing market share if they didn't shift to digital first operating model. So in summary, it's only the 10% trailblazers, the enterprise with the most advanced digital operating models were able to grow during the crisis. The migrators, sort of with patchwork, hung in there, and the aspirants lost market share. So, it's quite a bit of learning from that we gathered from these discussions. So those are some of the consequences of, waiting and watching versus being digital first.
That's great. I'd like to hear, Katrina, do you have a couple of moments to tell us specifically from your organization the importance of innovation, what you've seen, within what's worked, what hasn't worked?
Yeah, Erin, I was actually going to try to jump in, and I'll just talk in a more, practical approach. The workforce and how it's changing with their expectation about, dealing with minutia and repetitive work, et cetera. It's very different today, obviously, than it was 10 years ago, and it's going to be vastly different 10 years from now. The expectations as, the workforce turns over. We've really got to, and I'm going to talk just about internal productivity and in the sort of internal workforce, but doing ERP implementations and sunsetting old apps and trying to figure out a way to displace, older legacy technologies with more contemporary technologies. The cost component of that, as well as the sheer productivity drain that an organization suffers when they're trying to go through that process. We've got to be able to innovate how we do those implementations, our expectations for how they transition from one application type to another. So those APIs and getting out of these custom interfaces, all of this dropped work where we're trying to get robots and RPA to do things that really should not even exist to be done. So we're trying to RPA everything. We're trying to throw, well, why don't you eliminate what it was that you were trying to RPA to begin with, and then you don't need to RPA. So there's got to be this whole transformation in how we work and the expectation of how we work internally in order to create the financial capabilities to take advantage of some of these more cutting edge and contemporary, technologies, edge in the term that was referenced previously. But it's difficult for old industrials like, where I'm coming from to make that transition unless we figure out ways to eliminate through innovation a lot of the work that's being done today so that we can create space for those other areas. And then obviously the innovation externally with our customers, our connected product, the data that we're constantly collecting, how can they use that to inform from a customer perspective better so that they can take advantage of that information to make clearer, more concise, more predictive or prescriptive decisions as they continue forward. So it's really a double-edged approach. The internal component for a heavy industrial, old, multiple decades, 100+ years, how do we turn that machine through innovation? And then how do we work and innovate, in connectivity with our customer base? So it's a little bit of both, but there's that practical component of innovation and business outcomes that can't be missed.
Well, I would bet that you still have like front-end processors stuck in basements with COBOL, programmers that are sitting there, connected to them. Of course you do. And
COBOL programmers can make more money these days. So
they absolutely can, because there's like 5 left. And it's just a very difficult thing. I mean, you talked about an API.
Job.
Yeah, you talked about an API, but in order to get that, you got to go from point A to point B before it's automated. And so, these are very practical issues that need to be addressed. Does someone else have a burning response to this before we move on?
I think in general, on the networking side, we need to innovate in this cloud era, because we have realized that, networks cannot be built the same way they were built 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because the way cloud is being adopted in general by enterprises, you cannot keep building networks outside the cloud the way we were doing it. So there are tons of use cases which are popping up because of the way cloud provides all these resources and capabilities to do different things at a much faster pace. Right. So the networks have to move as fast as the application people are moving when it comes to development and implementation, deployment, and we have seen that network has been lagging. So tons of innovation required there. Tons of innovation is being worked on, and I'm sure like we will go into some more details of what type of innovation is happening and what's required in this area.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move forward here into our second section. Keep us on time. And I think this is where the topic seems to just be gravitating to naturally, which is the networking technologies and strategies. Because as I said at the beginning, it has been reinforced by many of our speakers here, is that you need this network. You need, the layer 0, 1, 2 to allow this to work, and it needs to be competitive. And so let's start with Amit, who can really talk to us about the underlay and the overlay from the service provider perspective. So Amit, from your perspective, what are the new innovations in networking technologies that CIOs should be paying attention to right now to improve their competitive edge? And I know we've touched on this a little bit before, but a little more detail right on the network.
I think Ravi encapsulated the requirement on cloud. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the future of networking technologies, it lies in bringing in more controllable capabilities, whether it's bandwidth on demand, policy changes through SD-WAN, etc. So that's one. The second area is being able to have composable networks. Right. It could be bring your own licenses, bring your own network, component security, and so on and so forth. And these are the features within the network. Along with intelligence, intelligence in the overlay could be intelligent routing, and in the underlay, it could be AI or ML-based fault resolution, for example. And finally, the convergence of, say, SASE, that's a term that's now being used significantly. To bring in some network security convergence, can be achieved by deploying, an evolved underlay and overlay capabilities. So just to elaborate, as part of the underlay capabilities, there is the core data network, which could be MPLS, Ethernet, so on and so forth. And then there is the internet, right? The core network needs to be more programmable. Traditionally, they've been static, right? Now they need to be more agile in the requirements today. The internet, on the other hand, has been less predictable, right? It's best effort so far, owned by different parties, and therefore there is no end-to-end SLA so far. So it needs to be more reliable and predictable in performance if we got to get those cloud applications and have data moving in a response with a good response time, right? And while on the part of the overlay capabilities, it covers both the solutions at the branches as well as cloud delivered capabilities. We talked about cloud earlier. So SD branch, and it could be branch of one if you have an employee at home. Everything that we need to manage at the branch for the customer through SD-WAN type of routers and connectivity solutions, covering the cloud managed intelligent SD-WAN and so on and so forth. And converge with the security that I mentioned earlier, both on-prem and cloud-based security. Yeah, the form of SASE. So those are some of the thoughts which are there in terms of how do we actually take this forward and make it more cloud ready, make it more relevant for the situation today. Let me hand it back to you with that.
Yeah, thank you very much for the service provider perspective. Atif, how about from the networking as a service perspective?
I think agility and simplification are the two key aspects. I should be able to build my network on demand. I shouldn't have to right? So as a service, Today, if I need to, I'll give you an example of Box. If I need to sign up, I can just go on their website, just sign up, and I can start consuming their service. From a network perspective, why do I have to go and spend days or months figuring out how to build my network? And if I have global, connectivity requirements, or if I have my employees in multiple regions, whatnot. It's just not moving at the speed of the application, and it's a big limitation in this day and age. So just the agility and simplification in networking will take us a long ways, and being able to consume networks as a service, consume network infrastructure as a service to build my global networks, and then on top of it, if you look at nowadays, you have to make sure that the networks are secure, because there are so many, ways you can connect to the cloud, and you don't want people just to be building random tunnels to connect to clouds and stuff. So you need to make sure that you secure the perimeter, you secure the network. So there's governance on top, there's visibility on top, there are controls which are built in. So all in all, I think it all boils down to speed, simplification, and just being able to consume it as a service.
Thank you. On to Ravi from the software as a service perspective.
Yeah, and Atif, if we get a circuit stood up in less than 30 days, I think that'd be a huge win. So I'm with you. I mean, they're basics, right? I mean,
right.
How about 2 weeks? Let's target 2 weeks. But it should, in reality, it should be a day, right? I mean, it's to your point, consumed as a service, versus a commodity or something that you have to wait for. Sorry, I had to pounce.
No, you have to do that. I'm still waiting for someone to virtualize digging the street up to my building. So we're waiting on that.
I think, Amit mentioned a cloud. I think, obviously cloud is driving a lot of this. I think you're seeing it's interesting and exciting now that you're seeing kind of the tail swing on the network catching up, and you can cite things like SD-WAN and 5G and Wi-Fi 6, right? To where, okay, the pipes and the plumbing are finally catching up to, the buildings and the applications, if you will, and the performance associated with that. I think it's interesting how it is coming to the forefront, right? That typically this isn't necessarily something that's on a CIO's radar, because it's considered infrastructure, and most CIOs come up kind of on the application side or the business side, and so there's a deeper connection to how the applications of software are driving and unlocking business value. But I think now is a view of network. If you have a cloud migration strategy, right, or you're moving, you're going to move your content to the cloud, you have to think about the network. You have to think about that performance. If you are a heavy manufacturer and you have distributed manufacturing sites, probably not always in the most well-connected areas, right? So how do I think, if I'm going to move those people to the cloud, how do I think about my network strategy, right? I mean, and getting back to Katrina's point on just some of the basics of things, right? Like, okay, I got to lay new fiber in most cases these days, right? Well, gosh, how can I get away from laying new fiber? Okay, maybe there's a play in 5G, to avoid some of that. But, I mean, those are kinds of things that now I think CIOs are thinking about when they think about kind of the broader strategy and how does network play into it. And then you add the cybersecurity side, right? I think probably, it's like 1A, 1B, cloud and cybersecurity as far as what's driving innovation in the network. Look, the network holds all the keys, to everything that you do. Like, if you want to understand what's happening in your environment, you need to understand what's going on in the network. I think that level, certainly cybersecurity is on just about every board's radar. And so, I think from a CIO perspective, hey, if I need to really sort of close gaps on cybersecurity, the network is certainly the first place I would start.
Right. Thank you. That was great. I'd like to hear from Tom now. I think Edge AI, machine learning, all of that.
Sure. Yeah. No, it was a great conversation. It's also intertwined as I was listening to the other speakers and thinking about some of what we're seeing from our customers, across the verticals we serve. And generally, take the supply chain because it's just so top of mind and for everybody, given the dynamics there. The conversation has really shifted, accelerated from what we would call the node, meaning, let's say the warehouse or the distribution center or the retail store. How do you optimize the workflow, the picking, the packing, the shipping, the sorting within that node, to a different kind of network, but the network nonetheless, which is optimizing that supply network. So it's not just looking at a node, but it's looking at all the nodes across the supply chain. And how do I optimize that end to end as a network? And that makes the network we're talking about here, right? The control, the connectivity, the cost of cloud, the security wrapped around that, that much more critical, because to optimize the network, we've got to aggregate data from all those nodes, from the transportation between the nodes, from the worker at the edge, and put into place a framework. A lot of companies have variations on this theme, but a framework we call sense, analyze, and act. And so being able to sense what's happening across, in this example, the entire supply chain, all of those nodes. Where is my capital equipment in real time? Where are my people, my inventory? Not just where is it, but like we're doing with the vaccine today, Zebra actually has a solution that's tracking the temperature profile that the Pfizer vaccine is exposed to as it moves through the supply chain. So when it gets to the point of consumption and it's going to be injected in somebody's arm, they can be sure of the efficacy of that particular dose. So down to the dose level, we're looking at temperature profile as that asset moves through the supply chain. And if you're going to make the right decisions, you're going to reduce waste, you're going to optimize your resources, optimize your inventory, you've got to be able to aggregate effectively and securely all of that data from those endpoints, bring it back to the cloud. And then, as you're getting at, Erin, run the AI and the machine learning, because there's just now too much data to operate on that data manually, that can extract the insights that individuals can go take action on. So again, it kind of comes back to this orchestrating the next best moves of your people, your assets, your inventory, based on that aggregated data view. And that's where the network has become, really, really critical. And I'll leave it with just a couple of quick examples of where are we actually doing that. What's the use case? So in the US, across 10,000 dock doors at one of the major public carriers, so think about transport of parcels through a network, we've got 3D cameras at each one of those dock doors, and they're monitoring the load efficiency, or what's called the cube score. Cube score is the volumetric load efficiency of that vehicle as these parcels are being placed on, say, a 53-foot trailer. And we're taking the load efficiency from an average of 70%. So if you see one of those 53-foot trailers going down the road, they're typically shipping 30% air. It's just inefficiency in terms of the way it's loaded. And we're bringing that up to 70, 80, 85, 90% load efficiency, which is reducing carbon footprint, less vehicles on the road, better ability to ensure on-time delivery of those parcels at the end of the day, and then just overall better network level visibility that helps them, our customers, orchestrate those assets. So that's an example at 10,000 dock doors. Another more recent one is about a month and a half ago, we acquired a company called Fetch Robotics out of the West Coast, and we're deploying those solutions in warehouses where, you should check out videos on this if you're interested, but Fetch robots that are autonomously navigating, these are autonomous mobile robots, a warehouse environment, and collaborating with humans on picking orders to be shipped for e-commerce fulfillment. And so if you think about the deployment of that robot, the mapping of the environment that it's going to operate in, the control, the connectivity, the security, that those robots don't get hijacked inside of that warehouse, as an example, all of that needs to be done, leveraging this network innovation. I like what others were saying earlier around the on-demand nature. That's what we need. We need the on-demand provisioning of these kinds of capabilities to be able to stand up a warehouse, within 30 days with that kind of robotics capability. So really, really exciting stuff.
That's great. Those are excellent examples too. And then we have Katrina here, who I know is going to give us some excellent info from the CIO perspective and the end user.
Yeah, I would just say I violently agree with what everyone has just referenced. And how do we package that up and sign me up? We have a very disparate geography, 600 plus locations across the globe. And the challenges that you face, country by country are different, dealing with some of these technologies and how you make this a reality. The speed piece, it's so funny because in, packages being delivered there, everyone's trying to solve the last mile scenario. It's the same thing with networks trying to solve the last mile, and the setting up redundancies trying to make sure that your 24/7 operations are, always connected. So there's a lot of challenges in this space. It's a lot of cost. So as we're talking about, how do we solve some of this? How do we solve some of it, in a very sort of cost attractive way? If you look at trying to, sunset some of these legacy approaches, but the speed equation, the flexibility equation, the ability to have a multi, solution, very critically important. And for our particular circumstances in this industrial environment, spread across the globe, if we could even do, half of what we just talked about in any sort of timeline, it's a game changer. So, the effort here, I agree, is extremely important. And wherever we can find those innovations and we can take advantage and consume those, we're all for it and trying to find pathways to that. So that's all I would say on that front, Erin.
Oh, thank you very much. So we have heard some great feedback here from, as I had said at the beginning, from very diverse perspectives. Anyone here on the panel have anything to add? Because boy, there was a lot of meat over the last couple of minutes here.
So I think I'll say just, I won't spend too much time on it, but just to go back to like the on-demand nature of these networks, I think we have made a lot of progress in the last 10 years when it comes to this. So I'll give you an example. Back in the day before SD-WAN, if I had to bring up like a site, as you're saying, I needed like physical connectivity in my building, like fiber. With SD-WAN, in fact, I'll give you another example of when we started with Tela, the building we started from, there was no fiber there. So we couldn't get the internet connection, the wide internet connection. So I remember like I went at that time, there was a company, Clearwire, they had these WiMAX modems, this was LT/WiMAX. And we were able to just get the WiMAX modem and just we got connected to internet. And then we thought like, why couldn't we start building enterprise grade networks on these types of transports? And that's how SD-WAN made or provided some way forward on these on-demand type of deployments where you could just deploy like a LTE modem. If you didn't have any connectivity, start building like extending your enterprise grade virtual network on top of those transports. And then once you had like physical connectivity there, you could incorporate that, still have the virtual network, but intelligently, use whichever transport you wanted to use for different types of applications. So we made like a lot of progress there. And now in this cloud era, I think we are going to the next step. And now, with so many resources available in the cloud, we can build our networks in the cloud, and the cloud edge moving closer and closer to the user. All you need is like one way of connecting to your edge. It shouldn't be, it shouldn't be different when I'm sitting at my office versus when I'm sitting at home. Because nowadays, like as we have seen during the last like year and a half, that majority of the people are working from homes. So there shouldn't be any different way of connecting from home versus connecting from the office. And the cloud edge, or the edge which gets closer to the user, needs to be secure with 5G and all those technologies coming in. I think that's doable, where you are able to just bring up your laptop or bring up your mobile device and connect and start consuming network as a service and with all on-demand attributes to it.
Oh, excellent. All right. This is great. Thank you very much for all the info on that. Really interesting feedback. And as we all know, the network is more and more important every day. A very wise person said it. I want to say it was on a net events panel I was on years and years ago. Wireless just means less wires, but they're still there. And we got to make sure that this network is bulletproof. All right, so moving on from here, we're on our very last segment here. I believe at this point, Atif, you were just speaking, but I am going to throw this right to you again very quickly. I'd like to hear from each one of our panelists here, though, on what's missing now. What's going forward as we look forward, and what needs to happen, so we can talk about the hyper-connected ecosystem. We've talked about it from the network perspective just in the last segment. So maybe a little more focus here on some of the applications that are riding some of the future-looking technologies, maybe a little more from the people and processes perspective. So we will start with Atif, but I just wanted to draw the attention also looking at, I did touch on this right at the beginning, looking at these three different timeframes, 19, 20, and 21, and about the initiatives that we're seeing throughout this industry. If you wanted to spend a moment and comment on if you agree, don't agree, if you saw something drastically different happen within your own organization during these timeframes, I'd love to hear that too. So start quickly with Atif.
I think that's a great question. So from the applications perspective, from the application traffic perspective, your traffic, before it used to be from, let's say, from your user could be sitting in the sites or wherever to data center, and all these technologies were meant to connect sites and users to data centers and whatnot. So now, if you look at the majority of the enterprises, majority of the companies, there are hundreds of SaaS applications which are being consumed by these companies, and now that application traffic is not, or majority of the application traffic is not from your user or your sites to data centers. It's more to where the SaaS is over the internet. So that traffic pattern has changed completely, the application traffic pattern in the last 10 or so years. So now you cannot build your networks based on the traffic patterns which used to be the case many years ago, which were designed for site to data center type of connectivity. So you have to be able to consume these SaaS applications wherever they are efficiently in a most optimum fashion. And now also this adoption of public cloud infrastructure. So people are building their or running their applications in public cloud. So now all of this needs to be, networks need to be thought differently. Networks need to be built differently based on these requirements. And as we go forward, more and more, in fact, based on many numbers, more than half the traffic, more than 50% of traffic is now destined for outside of your, the four walls of your network. And your edge is very flexible. It's changing. It's always moving, right? Because now your users are everywhere. So all in all, I think we need like a different mindset now, and we need technologies, we need platforms which are built based on this new mindset.
Thank you. I would say I would add a little more color to your stat there about the 50% that goes outside your wall. So I would say on the small to medium-sized business perspective, that kicks way high up. If I just look at our own and any of my competitors, we're 100% cloud-based.
Exactly.
And so anyway, so Tom, how about you next? And I'd like to hear your response here. What's next? What are we missing?
Yeah, so I think as we look at the deployment of these solutions, we spoke about some of this being able to stand it up, kind of in a more on-demand way. And I think be able to, as I mentioned in my opening comments around open innovation, is being able to build on top of each other. So one of the big areas that we're looking at is maybe, Erin, a layer above the network around interoperability and kind of transitioning the dialogue over to that. Because as we look at the types of things that we want to attach to the network, the context is becoming much more important. That's what a lot of the solutions, to get to the value of those solutions, it's being able to understand what's happening in and around the data. And what that really means is it's not just about, if we take Industry 4.0 and say I'm going to connect that robot on the assembly line, via 5G network back to the cloud so I can sort of drop and have it deployed and up and running quickly. Well, it becomes what's happening around that robot, what people are there to support what's coming off it, what material is on its way, raw materials on its way to it to ensure that it can perform its task properly. If we're going to get predictive on the maintenance, we need to understand the context of various assets on it. And so in some cases, that can be provided by that robot manufacturer. In other cases, it requires us to integrate into systems that are in and around the robot and kind of create a fabric of context, across it. And so those standards, that interoperability, I think is when we talk about what's missing, if we're really going to crack the value out of these next gen applications, becomes really important. And I think maybe to emphasize that a little bit, I'll just mention this concept, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with, but the notion of innovation diffusion, which typically kind of follows an S curve, right? It's sort of slow to adopt, and then it rapidly gets deployed and kind of levels off. And when it comes to connectivity and mobility, we're pretty far along, mobile first, data first in that innovation diffusion S curve. And so what our customers are asking for, and the industry is asking for, really requires us to not pedal faster on the existing S curve, because we're sort of at the point of diminishing returns, but to jump to that next S curve. And that's where we're going to want to automate actions. We're going to want to be able to leverage this contextual data to make better decisions. So, in our position at Zebra, fulfilling the needs of our customers, we're really looking at standards. Like as an example, it's a GS1 standard called EPCIS, which allows multiple vendors to attach information within a file that can track a particular good moving through the supply chain. So if it's that lettuce that got picked at the farm, from the point it's picked at the farm, what latitude and longitude was it picked from, on what day, at what temperature profile, how did that move through the supply chain? And all of that becomes a moving database over the network that travels with that particular asset, so that you sort of have that born on information all the way through to consumption. And I think that's something that doesn't happen without the network, but also requires us to transcend the network into this interoperability dialogue.
That's great feedback. Unless someone's really wants to respond to that, I think Ravi would have some good feedback for us next. What's missing now? What are we doing next?
Oh, fairly really open-ended question. As I think,
would you expect anything else?
I know. It is like it can go any direction, but trying to tether it in, and from my perspective, and certainly from, I'll give the box perspective, is, for us, making sure that the customer has an experience regardless of what type of network that they're running on. And I think this hits a little bit to what Tom may have been saying as well, is that interoperability, right? And an experience that is the same regardless of what you've invested in your network, right? And so things that, there's certainly things within our control that we can do within our product to try and enable that. But to some degree, we also depend on innovation continuing in the network space. And so that, and I'll add the cost dimension to this, is that in a cost effective way, people can enable the connectivity, the speed that they need, the bandwidth that they need in a cost effective way to support their needs of the business, the needs of the business. And that applies for vendors, for companies, whatever industry that you're in, that is going to be a need, right? Technology is, try and think of an industry where technology isn't driving something in a major way. And for us, that at Box, what we want to think about is, making sure that, we can provide that experience that is similar across, no matter what network it is. How do we work to continue to innovate and drive that? And then, how do we continue to provide that level of security? I think if there can be more inherent security built into the network infrastructure, I think that certainly puts a lot more, puts more folks at ease when they're looking to adopt new things. I think that's typically a big, one of the biggest risks that I think, CIOs and leaders think about is cybersecurity. How safe is this new technology?
Right. Thank you. Katrina, you did give us some marching orders in your last response, but is there anything else you'd like to add, about what needs to happen for innovation, for us to have a hyper-connected world that is up to your set of requirements?
Yeah, and I think Ravi really said it nicely there.
Okay.
This whole customer experience layer, it doesn't really matter what is underneath all of this from a customer experience standpoint. They just want things to work and they want it to be smooth, and the timeliness and all of those components. So really thinking about composable architectures, thinking about modularity, thinking about that customer experience layer sitting there and kind of a swivel chair mentality, where underneath it all, the customer doesn't need to know that it's connecting to XYZ in order to respond to whatever it is that their requirement is. So making this all as fluid and the transition points as fluid as possible, which I liked how Ravi just took that interoperability and really kind of stepped it further forward. To be honest with you, I don't care who you are out there. You're calling a healthcare company, you're calling a company to buy something digitally. Parts of it work, and then you go to try to return something and everything falls apart. Or you go and try to get a quality issue addressed and it falls apart. Or you say certain things will work and other areas will not work. And then that whole experience either becomes a frustration point where I'm going to try to find any way possible not to call you to buy your product again. Right, or it's so helpful and frictionless that, I'm going to come and buy from you guys again, and I'm going to divert more purchases in your direction. And then trying to the hyperscalers out there, trying to figure out how to fold that in, and then going, converting to these Amazons and large Costco's or whatever they are out there, selling large volumes of product. How do you compete with that as an industrial? And how do you not get overtaken by that as an industrial? So our connection points to the customer, that customer experience component, that interoperability component has got to be very, very tight. And I honestly, it's challenging to find industrials out there that are really on their front foot relative to solving a lot of these issues. So, for my company and for others out there, competitors, and any other industrial not a competitor, we're struggling with the same sorts of things. And we've got a lot of technical debt over the years that you got to figure out a way to manage through that in order to get to some of these more fluid, more progressive, more contemporary capabilities. So it's a strange balancing act that you've got to keep scrounging and fighting to realize, but at the same time, not lose focus on, those areas that will actually provide a value proposition from a customer, from our customer's perspective. How do we prioritize some of the usage of this, as we're continuing to navigate this innovation spectrum?
That's great. Thank you. And I'm going to hand it over to Amit to maybe just give his few moments here about what's next. What do we need to do to get us to this hyper-connected ecosystem?
One of the things we possibly need to look at is AI coming into the network. And there are certain challenges with deploying AI. There is the perception that it possibly takes away jobs, and in some cases it does. That it is also becoming very, very intrusive in some cases. But coming back to the network, the use case for embedding AI into the networks, into the applications, services, it can generate so much efficiency. The efficiency gains are tremendous. So it can be deployed for automating or to assist the human, the people to do the interventions. So in some cases, the decisions may be predetermined on the back of AI analytics, derived inputs, for example, understanding what's happening in the network in real time. So you could actually have self-healing networks. In other cases, we want the AI engine to recommend changes and then human interventions to actually execute on those, prioritize and take the final call. It could also be to help to diagnose the root cause and then be able to do faster incident resolution. All of these, add up to giving that better experience the better network experience, which is the part of the evolution that we're talking about. So, I'd like to close it off with that, saying that there are AI use cases that are available today, and it is one of the way forward in terms of embedding it into this discussion in 21 onwards, right?
Yeah.
In order to make sure that we have the better efficiencies.
Thank you. That's a great way to close it off. However, I will just piggyback on top of what every single one of you said throughout this panel, is that looking forward, what I want and what every consumer wants probably on the planet is to have my device, and it doesn't matter what it is, it can be any device, it can be every device, that follows me with an excellent, secure connection wherever I am on the planet. And my applications are, and it was mentioned by one of you folks, are secure, and my identity is cataloged across all of the applications. So we've talked about the sign-ons, we've talked about the identity, we've talked about all of the multi-cloud that it would take to do something like that. But that is what everybody is looking for, right? For it to work everywhere and to not have the complexity of getting in and out of all of the different places that we tend to live online. So with that, I am going to move forward here to our quick round robin, and we'll go left to right. Very, very quick, succinct, but just a takeaway that you would like the CIO listeners to this forum to have in their back pocket. So starting with Atif.
My quick 30 seconds, network as a service. I think that's the way forward. You should be able to build your global networks, which can be consumed as a service with built-in security and other network services. And networks basically should be built based on the use cases, and not just use cases should not be bolted on top of the network, but network should be driven by the use cases, and full visibility, full control, and connecting basically, as you said, Erin, users to applications wherever the users are, and there should be one way of connecting. One way of building networks, regardless if your network is ending up in multiple different clouds on prem locations. There should be one way of building networks, taking complexity out of networking.
All right, thank you, Ravi.
Well, in an odd twist of irony, my network just flapped on me. So with that, do not undervalue the importance of network in your overall IT strategy. As you think about transformation, incredibly important.
Well, the only thing that would have been funnier if it was Amit and he was on a Tata connection. That would have been funny. All right, you good? Are you good with that, Ravi? That's your take? Okay, yeah. Katrina.
Yeah, I would just say, regardless of, it's got to be about business outcomes. You've got to try. You need to, set up your proof of concepts, figure out where you want to focus. Don't try to be everywhere all the time, so that you can actually, put a flag in the ground and keep progressing forward. So it may seem your technical debt, other things may seem overwhelming, but there's always a path. So keep trying and keep consuming and keep becoming, keep changing and evolving. I just say keep moving. That'll be mine.
All right, Amit.
So there's going to be a little plug from my organization.
We'll take a plug. Come on, why not? Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, we're going to do it. So we actually took a positioning of secure connected digital experiences. It's quite a mouthful, SCDX, right? And that covers the work from anywhere solutions, be it the connectivity, the security, zero trust, multi-factor authentication, all of that on one side. And then the whole customer experience solutions on the other side, which is, it could be the contact center, store at home, capabilities, the collaboration solutions, and so on and so forth, right? So with that, we have we've envisaged the portfolio, which has both the connectivity as well as the collaboration solutions. We call it secure connected digital experiences. And I think that is the need of the hour. That is what is required. It has the network component, it has the collaboration component, the security component, and several other areas. So I would close with that.
Thank you very much. And Tom.
Yeah, sure. So, one thing I just point out is I think that, as you opened up with, Erin, is that consumer experience-oriented expectations that have been ushered in by the dynamics aren't going away. That convenience, the on-demand economy, it's here to stay. So embrace it. Embrace the digital transformation, the intelligent automation. Don't look back, look forward. Where can you partner to accelerate that future? That's the way we're thinking about it, is how do we pull the future forward? Because it's a pretty low risk bet that people are going to want more things delivered in less time. That's going to happen, whether it's data over a network or it's goods through a supply chain network. And then I think, as Katrina was saying, pick one and go. As you look to implement network, cloud, AI solutions, you don't need to have it all figured out before you get started. I think the biggest enemy of innovation is not no, it's maybe. Look at your business challenges, have conviction, which one would benefit the most from embracing the benefits of network, cloud, AI, and just get going. Keep evolving, as Katrina was saying, learn and build from there. And the last thing I'd just end with is leverage this concept that served us well of sense, analyze, and act to aggregate data from the edge over the network to the cloud, where you can apply AI and ML, you can operate on that data, and you can deliver better outcomes and consistency of experience. Much like Amit was just talking about, is those secure digital experiences for both your employees and your customers.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I will add my last bit of perspective, which is not mine. It's just 3 quotes from 3 of the panelists here that I think merit repeating. First of all, it wasn't a quote from Tom, but follow the lettuce and follow the football players and the world will be a better place, right? Secondly, from Ravi, the network holds all the keys for everybody, but for everything you need to do. And Katrina violently agrees and says, sign me up for all the good things that everyone on the panel is about to offer. All right, well, thank you very much. All that's left for me to do is to thank everybody on the panel for their very thoughtful, interesting feedback to all of the questions. So again, just great job, everybody. And so with that, thank you all, and I'll hand it over to Mark.